You ready?
Oh, you bet I am. Let's do this.
Let the battle begin.
Hello everyone, my name is Scomicmaker, and today we're going to be putting myself,
and me.
yes, and you, Banana Man, into the popular rhythm game Friday Night Funkin. I'll be sharing with you my process on how I was able to add myself in the game, including all of the mistakes I made along the way. That way, if you want to make some simple edits to this game yourself, you'll be ready for all the little snags that you might come across. So let's do that game thing that we're gonna do. The first thing that you have to do, of course, is to download the game. This game is free to play on Newgrounds, but you won't be able to do any edits to the game this way. Let me be clear here too, we will be making edits to the art of the game. Modding and changing things like music or notes isn't really my forte anyway. You can download the game at ninja-muffin24.itch.io/Funkin, which I'll leave in the description. This game is also free to download, but they do give you an option to pay for the game, which I highly suggest that you do because, of course, when you pay for games, what does it do? It helps the artists and creators, so make sure that you guys help them out. In fact, super crazy coincidence, but I've been working on this video for a little over 2 weeks now, and they recently came out with a Kickstarter. The Kickstarter is going to help them make a whole, full Friday Night Funkin' game, so if you're interested in that, or if you're a fan and you haven't heard about it yet, I'll leave a link for all that stuff in the description too. Anyway, make sure that you download the version that applies to your computer and unzip the game, and when you open it, the folder will look like this. Go ahead and put this folder in an easy to find place on your desktop or organize it where you would like to, but we will be going back and forth in this folder, so keep it close. Next, you will make a separate empty folder next to this one. Name it whatever you want, but I would suggest naming it something that you know is related to the Friday Night Funkin' game folder. I ended up naming mine Tempo Funkin', and we'll be getting to this folder in a second. Let's take a look at our super cool Funkin' game folder. If you click on Assets, then Images, you'll find a whole folder full of images from the game. I'm talking characters, backgrounds, arrows, cool fonts, all that stuff. This is the meat of our game that we're looking at here. This is the folder that you want to be paying attention to the most. For this video, I'll only be doing edits to the rap battle against Daddy Dearest, so I'm going to need the asset images for the dad, the girlfriend, and the boyfriend. I'm going to take these images and move them to my Tempo Funkin' folder. You can technically copy them, but as long as you have them intact, you should be good. The reason that we're doing this is just in case you ever want to put the game back to how it was originally, you can just swap the images in and out of the folder that we have. You'll essentially be replacing these images in the game folder anyway. So let's get on to the art. There are 3 basic characters that have to do with my channel, and that is myself, my husband Tony, and of course, Banana Man.
You're darn right.
And perfectly, most of the scenes in the game have 3 characters. There are more in some of them, but you get what I mean. So, this is the most painstaking process of this whole thing. It's time to edit. Now, to edit your images, you will need a program where you can make your images a transparent PNG. You'll know it's transparent if it has those white and gray squares in the background, and I use Clip Studio Paint to make mine, but there are free programs like Krita that allow you to save images transparent. In fact, some of the videos that I used to figure out how to do these edits used Krita, and it worked perfectly. What I would suggest is, now that you have your Daddy Dearest image in your program, let's save it in our Tempo Funkin' folder. First, I'm going to rename the Daddy Dearest images to Daddy Dearest Original, because here's the most important part of this. The images that you're going to be replacing in the game must have the same name as their original assets. For example, I'll be replacing the dad with Banana Man, so once my Banana Man drawings are done, I'm going to save it as Daddy_Dearest in all caps, just like it is in the original game files. It has to be exact or it won't work. So, starting with my Banana Man drawings, this is where I started to play with my drawings and see how this was going to work. This was with little to no knowledge, so I made lots of mistakes that I'll talk about, so hopefully you can avoid them. First, I draw Banana Man's body and duplicated it to fit every spot that Daddy Dearest was going to be in. Then I made sure that after coloring him, I had everything else on a separate layer. meaning facial expressions and arms. I did this so after I tested it, if I needed to adjust anything, I was able to. And adjust them I did. At first, I just looked at where Daddy Dearest was leaning or what expression he was making and tried copying that. I thought I did a pretty good job until I booted up the game. To make sure that the character ends up in the game, I would first save your image into your temporary folder. For Clip Studio, save it as a Clip Studio paint file so you can edit it later if you need to. Same thing if you're using Krita, save it as a Krita file. Then save it again, but this time change your settings and save it as a PNG image and make sure that your background is transparent with the little gray and white checkerboard pattern. If you've never done this before, make sure you check your layers, and the very bottom layer should be white. You just uncheck that box and it should make it transparent. When you save your image as a separate PNG, and this part is really important, make sure you save the image as what the image was originally named in the game. For example, the dad character sheet is named Daddy_Dearest, where it's all caps. The boyfriend is BF capital CAR, and the girlfriend is capital GF_assets. You can then open up the game folder again, go to Assets, then Images, and drag and drop each of your edited assets into the folder. Boot up the game, and you should be good to go. Now, back to what happened when I added my Banana Man drawings in there. What I found was, not only was he incredibly jittery due to me adjusting his body a bunch, but also the base of the banana was getting caught off, and the base of the previous banana was showing up behind him. That's when I realized that there is basically an invisible rectangle that the character sits inside on this character sheet. If anything comes in or out of this rectangle, it will be cut off or show up where it's not supposed to be. So what I ended up doing to fix this is that I kept going back in and squishing him and adjusting him until he stopped clipping. I realized that obviously a banana in that kind of space was probably not the best idea in hindsight, and I should have just shrunk him down and made him smaller. To fix the jittering, I also probably should have only distorted the top half of his body for the most part. That way his feet generally stay in the same spot. At some point I'll go back and do that for him, but I knew I had way more work to do in editing and the girlfriend and myself into this game, so I just decided to move on at that point. But Banana Man was my first time doing this in general, so it was basically just a learning experience altogether. Next up, we have the girlfriend, and who would be the most perfect person to shine as this beautiful long-haired girlfriend that we have to fight Banana Man for? Well, of course it has to be my husband. He is a beautiful man and I would fight for him any day. Because of how Banana Man turned out, I was a little skeptical about drawing the characters in my own style and being able to successfully get the result I was looking for, so essentially for the next two characters, I trace and edit the assets. As much as spending an eternity trying to animate this sounds super fun, I also was excited to draw us in the style of the game anyway, so I just went with that. I tried to be a bit smarter with Tony and work on the body in 3 parts: the head, the legs with the torso, and the arms. Having finished this part and now looking back, I probably would have done this a bit different because the animation turns out a bit stiff, but essentially what I did was trace the torso and the legs. Oh, Happy, you about to have some gorgeous legs. Mwah! Wow! Oh lord. Then I copied and pasted all of the girlfriend images that I planned on using. You might be wondering why I'm not doing the entire character sheet, and I'll get to that a bit later, but I went through and adjusted the legs and feet to match it as best I could, which I didn't do such a great job on in my opinion, but I also didn't really get to see how it looks until it's complete enough and was able to test it out. After drawing the arms and legs on separate layers, I draw a head that resembles Tony and basically do the same thing. I duplicated a bunch and tilted to fit the movements of the head on the girlfriend. For this part, if you're doing it on Clip Studio, I would actually recommend drawing this as a vector line art because with the amount of time you'll be copying, pasting, and adjusting, you'll have a very pixelated head by the end of it, or you can just duplicate the first head that you drew over and over like I ended up having to do. Now it's time to spend an eternity coloring everything and adjusting it all. I kept coloring things and testing it out in-game, realizing I had some colors go outside the lines or weird parts that showed up when editing, but but if you have some music or are listening to long video essays about different rabbit hole topics on YouTube like I tend to do, the time will just kind of glide by. Once he was mostly done, I did not want to redraw the speakers, so I kind of cheated a little bit by just erasing the original girlfriend from the image. This was probably not the cleanest way to do it, but it was the way that I ended up doing it. Once finished, the animation had lots of weird bits like the shoulders just becoming a weird jumpy mess, but I ended up fixing it way later. I spent hours on this part alone and hadn't even started on myself yet, so I decided to kind of like just let it sit for a bit, which I wish I didn't. For stuff like this, when you're looking for consistency, it's best to kind of work on it in batches, but basically I forgot to add the shading and hair highlights and had to add it in after, which was a pain but doable. Alright, now that I had all this knowledge, I knew that for this last set, I wanted to have a minimal amount of mistakes. And can I just say, oh my god, there is so much art for the boyfriend. It's kind of insane. But to start, I realized that the character assets are kind of grouped together based on the animation that he's doing, which in hindsight seems pretty obvious, and they all had that. So I started with creating a body for this first expression and copying and pasting the boyfriend to really get a feel for what kind of transitions were happening between the images, because they can be so subtle sometimes that it's hard to tell what's going on. Then, similar to what I did with Tony, I made the hand holding the mic on its own, I made the head, and then adjusted them ever so slightly if they moved at all. This took ages, but landed me the best results overall. After adjusting, I would move a strand of hair for animation, or fill in a bit of color here or there if I needed to do it, and I think one of the hardest things was just lining the character up to be in the same spots on each image, because if they aren't, then you get lots of jitter like what happened with Banana Man. I'm sure there's probably a much better way to do this, but this was just the way that I ended up going about it. I will say that you should probably work on all of these at one time, especially if you ever struggle with character consistency when it comes to drawing. When it came to working on the character expressions for when you miss a note, I could not for the life of me remember what colors or what filter I used to give my character the blue tint, but it's such a small detail that I'm probably the only one who noticed it anyway. But if that's something that matters to you, I would definitely keep it in mind. You'll see that with this I went back and forth a lot, copying and pasting the shadow layers or color layers just so that I could keep things as consistent as I could. This can get really messy quick, especially with all the copying and pasting, so I would recommend that after each expression you make, creating a folder for you to stick them in. I ended up numbering mine so that if I needed to, I could grab stuff from the folders I needed. But the missed note expressions were probably my favorite to make overall. They are so fun and silly and I love them. After finishing myself, I went and changed the art for the boyfriend and Daddy Dearest on the health bar at the bottom of the game and gave it another test. This made all of the work worth it. It was so cool to see my persona, Banana Man, and Tony in a freaking game. It's so dang cool. I love it so much. I did end up going back into it and editing a couple things like Tony's shoulder, as well as giving his hair the highlights he needed in the shadows. And I didn't bother doing the same with Banana Man though, because eventually I want to go back and completely redo him. Like I mentioned before, I didn't end up doing every single character asset like the retry character animation, since there was already so much I added into this one video alone. But also some of the girlfriend and boyfriend assets are for other levels and songs, and I just wanted to focus on the battle with Daddy Dearest for this particular video. There are some incredible edits with art and music though, and honestly, I don't even know how to begin doing that, but trying this out has definitely made me want to do more edits and stuff like this in the future. And if you would like to play with little mini Scomicmaker or any of the assets I made, I'll put them in the announcements on my Discord server. I'll also be linking them below in the description if you're interested. But that's basically it for this video. This was so much fun to do, and as time consuming as it was an absolute blast. Remember, this is just the way that I ended up going about doing this. I'm sure that there are plenty of other better ways, but if this video did end up being helpful to you, then I am super glad. Be sure to ask me any questions you have in the comments, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. If I don't respond to a question, it has either already been answered in the comments or it was covered in this video. I'll do my best to make sure I keep an updated FAQ in the description of this video as well. Be sure to look there if you have any questions before you ask them. As always, videos like this are possible because of my amazing banana members and people like you who like, comment on, and share my videos. I appreciate you all stopping by, and I hope that we can draw together again soon. Bye guys.
On a Friday night yet.